Never believed the stories. Not really. Locals warned me about Black Hollow Trail, a winding path through the Misty Mountains that only the reckless or the desperate dared to take after sundown. They spoke of whispers in the fog, of figures that followed without footsteps, of something unseen watching from the treetops. I laughed it off. Superstition, I told myself. Just folklore meant to scare away travelers. But that night, as I stood at the trail's entrance, something about the air felt different. The cold wasn't just cold. It was unnatural, seeping through my clothes like fingers pressing against my ribs. The mist coiled around the trees, thick and unnervingly still, as if it was listening. With a deep breath, I stepped forward. My boots crunched against the damp earth, the only sound in the suffocating silence. No wind, no insects, not even the distant hoot of an owl. Just silence, the kind that makes your heartbeat sound like a drum in your ears. Then I heard it. A voice, faint, almost too soft to notice, calling my name. I froze, my breath hitched. No one else was supposed to be here. I turned sharply, scanning the path behind me. Nothing. Just the swirling mist, shifting like something was moving through it. I told myself it was the wind. It had to be the wind. But then something moved. A dark shape, tall, distorted, barely visible through the fog, standing where I had been just seconds ago. Watching. I should have run, but I didn't. I couldn't, because then, in the silence, the whisper came again. Closer this time. And it was my voice, calling me back. I quickened my pace, telling myself it was nothing. A trick of the wind, a trick of the mind, but my instinct screamed otherwise. The deeper I went into the trail, the thicker the mist became, wrapping around my legs like something trying to hold me back. My flashlight barely cut through the dense fog, its weak beam swallowed by the endless gray. Then I heard footsteps. Not mine. They came from behind me, perfectly in sync with my own. When I stopped, they stopped. When I moved, they followed. I swung my flashlight around. Nothing, just swirling fog, and the skeletal outlines of trees disappearing into the void. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. I wasn't alone. I forced myself to keep moving, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. I had to be imagining it. Had to be. But then, crunch, a sound close, too close. Something stepped out from the fog, right beside me. I turned sharply, my flashlight flickering in my trembling hand. The beam landed on a pair of footprints forming in the damp earth, appearing one by one, as if someone invisible was walking toward me. My breath caught in my throat. I staggered back, but the prints kept coming, closer, deliberate. Then the voice returned, software familiar, wrong. Why did you leave me? The whisper coiled around me like smoke, my knees locked. I wanted to run, but my body refused to obey. Come back. A hand brushed my shoulder, cold, clammy, 2 long fingers. I turned and saw nothing. But the mist shifted, revealing a shadow standing just beyond the trees, tall, impossibly thin, its face hidden in the swirling gray. It didn't move, didn't breathe. It just watched. Then, it smiled. Not a normal smile, not human. Its mouth stretched too wide, teeth glinting like shards of broken glass. I stumbled backward, my flashlight flickering wildly. The shadow didn't chase me. It didn't have to. Because I knew, somehow, that it was already inside the mist and it was waiting for me to get lost. I ran. The fog swallowed everything, the trees, the path, even the sky. My own breath sounded deafening in my ears, ragged and uneven. My flashlight flickered in my trembling hand, barely cutting through the mist. That thing, whatever it was still behind me. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. I kept running until my foot caught on a root, and I crashed hard onto the damp earth. My palms scraped against sharp rocks, pain jolting up my arms. The flashlight tumbled from my grip and rolled ahead, its beam spinning wildly through the mist. That's when I saw them, eyes, not just one pair, dozens, glowing faintly in the fog, peering at me from between the trees. I froze. The world around me seemed to close in, the mist thickening like it was alive, breathing, pulsing. The eyes didn't blink, didn't move, just watched. Then a whisper, not just one voice, many, soft, overlapping, like a chorus of forgotten souls. Come closer. You shouldn't be here. Stay. Their words curled around me like vines, wrapping around my mind, pulling me in. My body felt heavy, my limbs sluggish. My head spun. And then, a laugh. It was distant yet sharp, echoing through the mist like it came from everywhere at once. Not human. Not right. The eyes moved. Slowly at first, drifting through the fog. Then, rushing toward me. Panic surged through me. I scrambled backward, fumbling for my flashlight. My fingers found the cold metal, and I swung it toward the eyes. The beam landed on a figure standing just feet away from me. A man. Or at least it looked like one. He was dressed in old, tattered hiking gear, his skin gray and weathered, like it had been left out in the cold for too long. His eyes, they weren't normal. They were hollow, black pits swirling with shadows, and his mouth stitched shut with jagged black thread. He raised a trembling hand, pointing behind me. I didn't want to look, but something forced me to. The moment I turned, the whisper screamed, and everything went dark. I woke up to silence. No whispers, no footsteps, no eyes watching from the trees. Just the thick, suffocating mist pressing in around me like a living thing. I had no idea how long I had been lying there. My head throbbed, my limbs were stiff, and a cold, damp sensation crawled over my skin, like I had been left out in the fog for hours. My flashlight was gone, my backpack missing. Even the trail beneath me seemed wrong. I wasn't where I had fallen. Panic flared in my chest. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding. Where was I? The trees looked different, taller, twisted, their branches stretching like skeletal fingers into the mist. The air felt thicker, heavier, charged with something unnatural. Then I saw the footprints, not mine. They led away from where I had woken up, disappearing into the fog. But what made my stomach turn was that they were identical to mine. Same size, same pattern. Like I had been walking. While I was unconscious, a rustling sound snapped me back to reality. Something was ahead of me. I squinted into the fog, my breath catching in my throat. A shadow stood just beyond the mist, tall, still, watching. I stepped forward, hesitant. And then it stepped forward too. My stomach dropped. I moved to the right. It moved to the right. I lifted my hand, and so did it. A sickening realization slithered through me. It was mimicking me. Number not mimicking. It was me. The mist shifted, revealing the figure completely. And I saw myself, same face, same clothes. But the eyes, they were wrong, dark, empty, hollow. And then it smiled. A slow, unnatural stretch of the lips. Too wide, too forced, too inhuman. You shouldn't have come here. The voice was mine, but it wasn't me. It took a step forward. I took a step back. The smile widened, splitting its face like cracked porcelain. You're lost. My pulse hammered in my ears. I turned and ran. The thing, the other me, laughed, a distorted, broken sound that echoed from everywhere. The mist around me began to shift. The trees moved, twisting and stretching like their branches were reaching for me. The trail disappeared beneath my feet, swallowed by the fog. I wasn't running through the forest anymore. I was running through something else. Somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. "You can't leave," the voice whispered from ahead. I skidded to a stop. The other me was there, waiting. It tilted its head, smiling that impossible smile. Behind it, the trees bent backward, their trunks splitting open like gaping mouths lined with teeth. "This place has already taken you." My breath came in ragged gasps. The mist tightened around me, coiling like invisible fingers, closing around my throat. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. And then, as my vision blurred, I felt it. Hands, dozens of them, clawing at my skin, pulling me down. I fought. I kicked, thrashed, tried to tear free. But the last thing I saw before the mist consumed me completely was my own face, watching from the fog. And it was still smiling. I woke up gasping for air. The mist was gone. The trees were still, and I was back at the trailhead lying on the cold, damp ground like I had never left. My backpack was beside me. My flashlight, now dead, still clenched in my hand. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination? I sat up slowly, my body aching like I had been running for hours. The sun had begun to rise, casting long shadows through the forest. I should have felt relieved, but then I saw them. Footprints, leading out of the mist and stopping right where I had woken up. But the worst part, they weren't mine. Something had followed me back, or worse, something else had walked out in my place. I don't know what happened that night, or if I ever truly escaped. But sometimes, when I pass by a mirror, I feel like the reflection is watching just a little too closely. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I swear, I hear my own voice whispering from the fog.